and marketing for the EdFi Alliance. And you're joining our webinar, just a quick 30 minutes workshop talking about data and how we can more effectively use that at scale in school districts and in your organization. So before we get started, just a little bit of a housekeeping. I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren, who will be monitoring the chat. So if at any time you have a question, please feel free to pop that into the chat or the Q&A feature of the WebEx. And then we are also recording this, so we will send out the PowerPoint afterwards if you would like it, and we'll post that recording on our webpage, edfi.org, where you found this initial webinar. So with that, we'll get started. I know your time is valuable, so I don't want to keep you more than the 30 minutes. So let's jump into this. Okay, so we are here to talk about EdFi, of course, but also bigger than that, data interoperability and how that might affect you and your organization and the work that you're doing there. And so we like to always start off with this question: what are your current student data challenges? And there are probably an entire list of things that you might be challenged with when you're thinking about data. What we are seeing are the following, right? What our community tells us is that before they really have data interoperability, they're dealing with inaccurate data. It's outdated. Perhaps it's incomplete. Maybe you don't feel fully confident in the data that you are seeing and the data that you do have. For sure, it's siloed. That's the number one issue that we're hearing, is that a school district or a data analyst within a school district has multiple sets of data, but they're not all connected. So you're having to log into multiple source systems to see the data. Not only that, it's so much more difficult to make sense of that data. I'm a mom, and I remember when I had a fourth grade parent-student or parent-teacher conference, and my poor little teacher, she was so wonderful. It was her first year out of to teach, and she had printed out an entire spreadsheet, but it was like 5 spreadsheets that she had taped together and then highlighted my kid's name across all these spreadsheets, and it just was so demonstrative of the problem that our educators have with data. They can't just have it all in one spot. And my heart just went out to her, because I'm like, this problem has been solved. Unfortunately, you don't have the tools to solve it yet, but that's just one example that we see of educators like yourselves, like administrators in school districts and others that are really trying to make data informed decisions, but we're almost making it impossible for that to happen. So this ultimately, what happens is, because you have all this different data sources and you've got different systems, you've got different systems for the finance piece, for grading, for all the different functions and systems that a school district can have, the IT team usually spends all their time maintaining these, like, kind of, I call it like a spaghetti bowl of connections, right? You've got all these connections happening, and you aren't able to really focus and hone in on the data, because you're just spending all your time keeping up with these connections, keeping up with all these disparate sources of information. And so this is probably not the highest and best use of your time. And it's no one's fault. It's just the way that IT architecture has kind of built on itself over time, right? We add one system this year, another system another year. This other system is going to solve all of our problems. We're going to add that one on top. And before you know it, you kind of are left with this spaghetti bowl of connections that you're attempting to maintain, and you can't really take any of the data out of it. So this is where data interoperability can be extremely helpful to your organization. Simply put, it's the seamless, secure, and controlled exchange of data between the applications. And this is what EdFi is all about and what we help with. Oh, I'm losing my, there we go. So we go from the spaghetti bowl of connections to this, which is the EdFi Operational Data Store, the ODS, in the middle. And all of this different source systems of data come in through a secure API into the ODS, and then they are fed back out again through a secure API into a data visualization tool. This is typically referred to as a dashboard. There's many different tools on the market. and your district probably already has a tool that you already use. There's many out there, like I said, but the data, because it's standardized and because it's through the secure APIs, you can pull it into any data visualization tool that you like. But really what's happening there on the left side is the SIS data, assessment data, finance data. Those are just 3 examples. All of the different applications that your school district might be using can be fed into the ODS, and through the secure API can be pulled back out. And so you can actually see the data in one spot, and you don't have to print out spreadsheets and highlight kids' names across the board. So when you are leveraging data interoperability, it's going to give you that complete view of each student. It's going to allow data to move between these systems securely. And that we sponsor the COSIN CTO survey every year. And we know that the number one concern of CTOs and CIOs in school districts is cybersecurity and security. But it's hard to do something about that when you're spending all your time maintaining those connections and not thinking about your overall data architecture. So really, how do we prioritize cybersecurity, but also prioritize data privacy and who's accessing the data and when they're accessing the data? And really, it's going to empower you as the administrator or the person in the data department of your school district to really control your data, not to say, hey, SIS vendor, I need a report, or hey, this other group that we spend money with, please just give me some data, give me my own data. This allows you to control your data, and really it's starting what I've seen and what other people in the EdFi community have shared with us is that it's really a different approach to how you think about your data architecture, rather than just have lots of different vendors kind of piggyback and cover on top of each other. It's really a way for you as a district to control that data in a different approach and different way. It also lets you choose the best instructional tools available rather than getting locked in to one vendor that might have a solution for every single thing that you might need. This having data interoperability at the core of your architecture allows your educators, people in the building, different folks around a school district to choose what's going to be best for them, not just to be dictated to say, you bought this one walled garden and you will have all of the tools within that solution and you can't go anywhere else. And we know this doesn't work anyways. We've heard from school districts that have upwards of 500 different applications that they are trying to maintain, that they're working through. It can get even higher than that. I'm sure you guys all have similar experiences with that. So really the main message here is that when your schools achieve data interoperability, you can solve other challenges more effectively. So it's not just, yes, getting your data house in order is of course best practice. It's hard, right? Easier said than done. But really the true value is that when you're able to use that data in a way that can affect change in your school district. I recently sat with some EdFi community members at our tech congress, and they were saying how the previous superintendent um, was just not tracking kids when they were going to the alternative high school. And so they would never track the data of students like graduation rates. And apparently it was a smaller school district. So they got away with it for quite some time. And then the school board came in and said, no, we need the real data around this because we have to solve a problem. And if you can't look at the data and have that transparency, you can't solve bigger problems. So in the case of that school district, they were just kind of sweeping their non-graduation rates kind of under the rug, and they weren't really even tracking them in any kind of meaningful way. Just one small example of how are you going to help solve a problem if you don't have the data to first identify it? So that's kind of what we're thinking about it as we think about data interoperability and how school districts can use it to solve bigger challenges. So some of the bigger challenges that we see, these are very common issues across lots of school districts across the country that we're seeing, right? Ensuring equitable access for students. And the equity question, right? There's definitely a lot of buzz around that. it means different things. It's very nuanced. There's lots of different avenues you can take with this, but you first have to start with the data. You're not going to get a full picture of what's really happening in a school district, whether it's equitable access, whether it's, your bandwidth, whether it's, is every student getting a device that they need? All of those things start with data and really getting a clear picture. Of course, with the pandemic, engaging online learners, and this even goes beyond that. We're seeing a lot of schools, even though pandemic is kind of, we're in the summer months and it's kind of waning, and we're all back to the classroom. We still see a lot of use for engaging online learners, whether that's even in the building or at home. Addressing chronic absenteeism, we know that when kids are chronically absent, they are more likely to drop out of school altogether, and that has major repercussions, negative repercussions, and for the rest of their lives, really. So addressing chronic absenteeism is extremely important, and you cannot do that without having all the data at your fingertips. Of course, family engagement is a big one. That's been an issue. Again, the pandemic really exposed that. And we saw across the board that families were looking over the shoulders of their kids as they were engaging online, and they wanted to be they wanted to have a portal or a way that they could have direct communication with their teachers. And really, we know that family engagement is a precursor to student success. So that's very important. And then, of course, multiple measures of assessment. Here in Texas, my kids do the MAP test. They also do the Texas STAR, which is our state standardized test. Those at least maybe they are, but I don't know if as a parent I know this. Those two assessments, as a parent, I don't get those results put together for me in any kind of way that I can easily analyze and understand. And so let alone teachers, right, that are doing multiple assessments throughout the year with quizzes and different assessments. So it's very important to solve that as an issue. And again, cannot do that without all the data. So what does this mean for you? So if you're able to really think about what is our big challenge that we have in our school district, what is the challenge that I would most like to tackle? Um, when you think about that and you pick one of those items, or maybe you have your own, really can think about when you are able to use data interoperability to solve those challenges, you're going to have transparency. Like I was mentioning with that school district a minute ago, you also get those insights and that data back to you more quickly. So real time or near real time, so that you can make changes more quickly, right? So chronic absenteeism is a perfect example of this one. I heard from a school superintendent in my area here. He was saying that they were so glad that they were able to get their student attendance records on a monthly basis. And I thought, no way, that's way too late. Once, especially for like in a secondary school, once you know that students are absent or have a pattern of absences, you have to address that immediately. A month is you're too late, right? So we need to have our educators have that data real time or near real time. Understanding individual and aggregated learning outcomes and achievement, back to the patterns, right? We want to see if there's a pattern that we can help support a student in a different way if they need it. Um, Responsive data architecture, obviously sustainable and future proof, so you can plug in different applications over time. You are not locked into just one for a big giant contract for all of time. And then it allows you to select the best tools on the market. So how might you get started with this? How might you think about, okay, of the problems I just identified, and we're just talking about these big challenges that might be similar in your district. Okay, so if you were thinking about that, what would you do? How would you go about, all right, sounds good, Caroline, I want to get started. The first thing I would want you to do is start with the starter kits. We developed this series of kits that really help you. They have sample data in them. You can read through, understand what the sample data is kind of showing you, and then you can stand up a demo of your own in your own environment in matters of a couple hours if you have the time to dedicate to it in one sitting. You can also come back and forth to it and continuously learn about how to do it. But we made these and we developed these to be very easy to understand. And one thing that I prioritized with our technical team, because at Ed5, we really started as a technical data standard and a set of tools. And so we're very good at communicating to technical audiences. What I've prioritized over the last couple of years is really prioritizing the communication to non-technical audiences within school districts. So what we've seen the most success with EdFi and with interoperability is when there is a technical lead and then there's like an instructional leader. And those two people, those two roles at a school district work together to really tag team and buddy up and champion getting your data house in order and thinking about how are we going to solve these big challenges with data. So the starter kits, even if you're a non-technical person, you can understand the starter kits. You can go through those. You can see how the data is being used, how we're able to pull the data through so you can actually see it in a dashboard visualization tool. So first, go to edfi.org. You can either, if you already have a login, which you might if you're on this webinar, great, just click the community login button, or if you don't yet have an account, just hit the get started. That will sign you up automatically for our newsletter. So we'll send you a newsletter so you can stay up to date on all of the important news items and different alerts that we might want to send to our community. And then you can go directly to techdocs.edfi.org, and you'll want that to have that sign-in information handy. Then you can find a starter kit on the left-hand bar of our Tech Docs page, which is really a huge kind of catalog of all of the resources for EdFi and for interoperability and learning about interoperability. You can go to the menu bar on the left-hand side and pick one of these problems that you might want to tackle. The starter kits are organized in 3 sections: a demo guide, a quick start guide, and a setup guide. And the setup guide is really the one that once you go through the other 2 steps, that setup guide is going to help you set it up on your own machine or in your own environment. But the demo guide shows you the solution with sample data, so you can actually get to seeing what could this look like in my environment pretty quickly with those starter kits. So definitely encourage you to do that. Okay. So you might be thinking, and one of the top pages that we get hits on our website is, what is a data standard? Why is this important in this whole world of data interoperability? A data standard is, so we've got the ODS at the core. The data standard, I always like to communicate it as, it's like a recipe for organizing your data across multiple systems. So one system might use one way to categorize a name or a grade. Another system might use another way to do that. And yet another system perhaps has a different way. This is particularly, you can easily see this when you look at dates, the format that dates are made, right? There's like the European fashion. There's more of the one where you have to have all 4 digits on the back end for the year. There's all these different ways that you can write a date, and lots of systems it's not standardized across all these systems. So the EdFi data standard is a set of instructions that tells those systems, organize your data in this way, so then it can all talk to each other once you do pull it out into the visualization tool. So you're pulling in SIS data, finance data, like all of these different, tests and rosters and programs and grades. I mean, the amount of student data is sometimes overwhelming, and it all is speaking a different language right now unless you have it on the data standard. So that just is like this outside wrapper, and at the core is the ODS, and that is what communicates back in and out through those APIs from the various systems. So just a minute about data visualization. This is so important, right? This is it's very hard to explain it can be hard to explain what data interoperability and a data standard is, because it's not something that you can tangibly touch. I mean, you can go look at the files online, but it's not something that you can hold in your hand or show to a superintendent or a school board person to say, like, look at our data, right? This is where data visualization really comes in. We want to be able to have lots of people just refer to them as a dashboard, but some sort of way where you can look. Maybe it's a color-coded thing over time, like red, green, yellow for chronic absenteeism. It's a way for us to really digest that information in a quick way so we can synthesize it and make some decisions about it. So it's really getting that full picture. So of course, when you have something that you can show, you can see that in real time. You're getting all the data in one spot. You get the full complete view of the student, and you can, this ultimately what we're all wanting to do, right, is to flag and respond to the trends earlier so you can add some supports for your educators or the students that they're serving. This is an example of one of the EdFi dashboards. So this is pulling in the student information, parent and guardian information all in one spot. Then you've got the grades, you've got a roster of all of the classes that they're enrolled in. You're looking at an attendance rate, right? And so this is all sample data, by the way. This is not a real student, but we have some of these types of examples in those starter kits, so you can really see what could this look like. And this is particularly helpful when you're trying to get an instructional person on board with, changing the way you're doing your data and your architecture. This is really important to be able to show something to someone, especially to non-technical people like myself. I'm like, okay, this makes sense to me. I can get on board. This is awesome. I want to be able to provide this to my teachers and my administrators so we can easily get to this information. Now, this is just student data, one student dashboard. I've seen other dashboards that aggregate this data over time per school, per district, per building. And it's really powerful because you can see what's doing really well, what might need some support, and what needs our attention. And again, you can't really solve these big problems without the data and without really looking at it and being transparent about it. So all of this sounds great. How do we get started? How do I get plugged into the EdFi community? Number one, you're here today, and I applaud you for that. Thanks for taking the time to learn more about interoperability. It's something that I've heard from superintendents that, it's your hair is on fire with a million other things that have to be taken care of right away. Interoperability, while it's so important and it underscores all of the things that you guys are doing in your organizations, it doesn't always receive the attention that it should. And a lot of school districts, what I'm seeing is that maybe they've got single sign-on, and then they think, okay, cool, I did data interoperability, check that box. Let's move on to making sure that our internet is, at the fastest speeds across the district, right? There's so many competing priorities for your time. So the fact that you're here is wonderful, and I applaud you for that. So who is the EdFi community, and how can you get plugged into it? How can you get started? So we are all over the country. We're nationwide, and we've got lots of, so states, of course, use EdFi to report up to the federal government. That was kind of how EdFi started initially, was standardizing those state reports. But then the school district realized they could use the technology as well. So all of those orange and blue dots are either a single LEA, or they are representative of a collaborative, like a regional service center, or some sort of grouping of LEAs that kind of use economies of scale to serve their students with technology and other services. So we've got a huge swath of the education community already using EdFi. We're educators, technologists, of course, vendors. It's kind of a three-legged stool, right? You've got to have the states, you've got to have the vendors, and you've got to have our districts. And so if everyone can work in concert together, we can really start to change the way data has traditionally been used across the country, and really get it out of those silos into something that can be super useful. So when you do go to edfi.org and you sign up for an account, or if you've already done that, you would probably have seen this. This is what you're going to kind of get plugged into, right? You're going to get some solution guides, you're going to get the code, you're going to get those resources. We are a nonprofit, we're funded philanthropically. And so we give all of these things away complimentary and just to our community. And our mission is to see change in the way schools use data at scale to support students and to change the way to positively impact students. So you're going to get technical documentation. You're going to get plugged into the EdFi community, which is a super fun group of people. I've been here for 6 years, and I can attest I've made some wonderful friendships with people that I would never have met before. And then, of course, access to our support system. So first step, I did mention the starter kits. So if you already kind of have an idea in your mind of this is the problem I want to solve, starter kits are for you. And it walks you through step by step. If you're kind of like, okay, this is great, sounds good. I don't know where exactly, I don't really have a pressing problem I'm trying to solve right at this moment, then I'm going to recommend to you to go to our EdFi Academy. We just launched this last fall. It is really well done. One of my colleagues pulled this all together, and it's 4 courses that takes you probably I mean, you can spend as much time as you want on it, but probably about an hour or two for each course, and it really walks you through all of the basics, from the basics to even the most kind of in-depth technical understanding of how this all works. So there's definitely some information there for instructional leaders, non-technical people in your district, and then there's areas for sure that your technical people would want to get plugged into. And it really just covers the gambit from starting at what is interoperability all the way to how do you actually do the coding and put this all together in your own environment. So you can get to the Academy from edfi.org. It's one of the buttons in the top. And of course, if you've already signed up for our emails, you're probably already getting reminders from us to go ahead and engage with that content. So what I would love to share with you and help you kind of wrap your brain around, what are my next steps? Decide that this is what you want to do. Start with a specific problem and then get a buddy. If you are the technical person, get an instructional leader to be your buddy in this. If you are the instructional person, get a technical person to be your buddy. We've seen that is the way to successfully kind of change the way you approach data in your organization is the buddy system. Of course, go to edfi.org, create an account if you haven't already. Start with the EdFi Academy 101 course. It's all there on our website. Log into the Tech Docs page and start exploring. That's just a ton of information there. Starter kits, already mentioned that. We do have a Slack channel, and it's monitored by some of my more technical colleagues. So if you have a really technical question, that's your spot. And they would love to help you there. And then finally, attend the EdFi Summit. Every year we have an awesome opportunity to connect with colleagues and people all across the country, vendors, states, collaboratives, managed service providers, lots of LEAs that are there. So we all kind of convene in Austin in the fall, and this year it's November 6th through 9, and we would love to have you there. We will be launching the registration site next week for that. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and we are almost at time. Lauren, were there any questions?
Don't see any questions at the moment, but if anyone has anything, feel free to ask.
Yeah. My email is on the front end of this presentation, and like I said, we'll be posting the recording on our event page where you found this webinar event initially, and we probably will also be emailing that out to all of the participants, right, Lauren? And might be particularly helpful if you wanted a colleague to join you on this webinar, but they couldn't take the time. It would be great to forward that over to them so they can have the information as well. So if there are no other questions, we are just here to ensure that your district can make the most of student data at scale and make that more accurate, more secure, and make the data more usable. So that's our mission. That's what we're here to do, and we're here to support you as you go through that journey. So with that, we'll conclude the webinar. Thank you so much for being here.